finance major at Wayne State College. He's been involved in a number of different sports and activities, intramural sports and activities. 7 semesters on the dean's list. He's going to graduate and take a finance position in Omaha. And I did say I ended up being his 3rd advisor, so I kind of feel bad for him in that sense. So, although I didn't do a lot of work, it was pretty much done ahead of time. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jay. Come on in.
Yeah, so I'm Jake Ritter. The topic that we go over today is sneaker resale dynamics and athlete performance. So it all starts with, back in 2020, I was stuck in the house, nothing to do, wanted to pick up a new hobby, and I saw this particular sneaker had released, and I found it incredibly interesting that 2 brands that really had nothing to do with each other decided to collaborate and make the shoe. So it's called the Chunky Dunky. It's a Ben & Jerry's ice cream collab with Nike, and they made this shoe. So I found it interesting, but I didn't really get what all the publicity was about, mainly because I think it's kind of an ugly shoe. I would never wear that. More of a statement piece, put it up on the mantle or something. But after further research, I found out that in the secondary market on websites like StockX, which I'll go into later, eBay, Facebook Marketplace, this $100 shoe was going for $2,500. So that sparked some interest in me. After further research, I found out that the secondary sneaker market was massive for reselling. It's got a value of about $2 billion. There's people that completely shape their entire lifestyle around this market, whether they're selling shoes, they have a forum, the different websites, stuff like that. So that led me to my research paper. I did a little bit of reselling in college. I found that I could make a couple bucks here and there selling to some college kids, which was cool. But my research paper more went into endorsements and how the stock kind of affected demand, specifically like celebrities like Eminem, he has a signature shoe, brands like Ben & Jerry's, even 7-Eleven, and then athletes, of course. So my original advisor and I decided that we wanted to study kind of the effects on how a quantitative value could transition into the resale market. So looked at celebrities first, specifically like artists, and other than like Billboard hits maybe, or like #1 with some of their music, there wasn't really a way of tracking how that would affect the shoes. And then brands, I suppose you could track revenue and how that affected it, but ultimately I decided on how athletes' performance affected their signature shoes. So that brings me to my main question, which was, based on NBA athlete performance in a season, could I accurately predict the future resale value of their signature shoes? So to begin, there were a couple of variables that I decided to omit. The first being average game attendance. I thought that would be a pivotal factor when looking into the resale market, how popular the team was. But the average game attendance for a given NBA team usually is the capacity of their arena. So I didn't really see a need to include that in my model, just because it was pretty consistent for all 5 of the athletes that I looked into. Same with viewership. There's a lot of different events that go on in the NBA season that kind of take away or add to viewership, and it just kind of fluctuates it too much, especially looking at like the viewership during the playoffs versus game 20 of the season. You're going to have a lot more viewership during the end of the season, so I decided for practical reasons to leave that out. And then I looked at material fluctuation, whether it's the price of rubber or leather, textiles. It did fluctuate from year to year, but I figured for multi-collinearity reasons, I would leave that out because that was kind of already established in the retail price of the shoe. I'd imagine that already played a role, so I left that out for that reason, so it wasn't redundant. And the last one was the stock of the sneaker. Because the shoes that I'm looking into aren't particularly limited, just because, you know, these are all basketball athletes, the shoes that they sell are actually going to be worn by non-professional athletes, so they're pretty much always in stock. So for that reason, I left that out too, and I just focused on athlete performance. So from left to right, the athletes that I chose are Steph Curry, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Russell Westbrook. The main reason I selected these guys over 2015 to 2022 seasons was because, you know, they're at the top of the NBA as far as performance and popularity, and same with their shoes as far as revenue and how much they kind of fluctuate in the secondary market. So it just kind of made the most sense given how their careers overlapped and how their signature shoes kind of came to be to use these 5 athletes in that given time frame. So going ahead a little bit, I decided to choose a multilinear regression to predict the value of the future resale of a shoe. So below is my equation, and it has my intercept and my error term, and then the variables that I put into it were the different performance indicators that I felt were the most important, which would be average points per game, average rebounds per game, average assists per game, and then 2 values that did not have quantities associated with them, which were MVP and if their team won the NBA championship. So I decided to do dummy variables for those 2. So it's a 1 if they won the MVP, a 0 if otherwise, and then for the same thing for the NBA championship, it's a 1 if their team won, and a 0 if otherwise. And then the y in my equation would be the predicted value. So I apologize in advance, it's going to be a lot of squinting, but this is the best way to display this data, unfortunately. It's just a snapshot of my actual workbook. So for example, this is Steph Curry's time frame that I chose. So in 2015, his first shoe came out. I have the retail value of each shoe from when it came out to the end of it. It never fluctuates for any of the models that I'm looking into. But all of this data was pulled off of StockX, like I mentioned earlier, and that's just a secondary market where you can buy and sell, and it tracks all of the prices in a given month across all the different colors that the shoe comes in and all the different sizes, and then averages it. So it made my job pretty easy. As you can see, you know, there's different fluctuations when the shoe first comes out. Given different models, sometimes the resale value will go down, which could be based off of stock. Sometimes it can go up right away for the same reasons. And then I correlated each of the stats for the particular season to the shoe model. So as you can see in 2015, Steph Curry averaged 23.8 points a game, 4.3 rebounds, 7.7 assists, and then he won MVP and they won the NBA championship. So I then took all of this data and I made that table at the top of the screen there, so it just makes it a little easier to read. I left out the resale value because that was more used for descriptive statistics later on, just so I could compare. But as you can see, I've got the retail here, and then the different performance indicators, followed by those dummy variables that I was talking about, the 1s and 0s. I then ran a regression, which gave me all of my coefficients for my linear regression equation. And for all 5 athletes, this is just for Steph Curry, just so we don't all have to squint at the screen for 5 different athletes. With that, I was able to make this table. So again, that's my original model, and then that's all the values being plugged in for a given year. And then I was able to look at the retail value, the actual current resale value when I made the table, and then the predicted resale value based off of my model. Looking into results and findings, I summarized all 5 athletes. So as you can see, I have the actual resale value that it's currently at and the predicted value. And then underneath of it, I did just a simple correlation And other than LeBron James, which the model did not necessarily pass, the main reason being his actual resale value is significantly more than the predicted value, which could be due to a zillion different factors that were not accounted for in my model. If you look at like Steph Curry or Kevin Durant, they're around 80%, which I was pretty proud of. And then Russell Westbrook pulled, and it was 97.75% based off of correlation between my model and the actual value, which I was more than happy with. So then going into my summary, fortunately, all of the shoes that I looked into, they all went up in value over a certain amount of time. So it made my job easy, but if you did use my model, there is plenty of potential to make profit if you were to purchase that shoe and sell it in the secondary market later on. However, my original question was, could I predict the resale value of a shoe based off of certain performance indicators? And I think that my conclusion is yes, I can. Other than that outlier, LeBron James, if you look at the 4 different athletes, I averaged about an 84% correlation. And then in that one athlete, Russell Westbrook, it was a 97% correlation. So I think that definitely proves that I was able to correctly predict it. Now, excuse me. So like I said, there are other factors that will play a big role in this. Specifically, athlete attitude on and off the court. I can't really quantify if an athlete has certain legal troubles or they take a certain political standpoint that may affect the consumer preferences for their certain product. But at the end of the day, I was more than satisfied with how my model held up, and I can indeed conclude that athlete performance indicators do play a role in the secondary market of their shoes. Are there any questions? Griffin?
Do you think that like with LeBron specifically, because he kind of has a personality outside of basketball, like with KD and like Westbrook, like those are NBA household names, but they aren't necessarily as widely known in like pop culture. Do you think that with LeBron specifically, just because he's such a pop culture powerhouse, that kind of contributed to the variation between the actual value and the one that you predicted?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. If you look at like, so I think the main reason that Russell Westbrook worked out so well for me is because the years where he performed so well when put into my equation were when he was averaging that triple-double for a couple of seasons, and thus that's why his actual resale value was so high, and I was able to predict that based on those performance indicators. Now with LeBron, like you said, he's such a household name. He's pretty much the face of the NBA, I think we can all agree currently. So, he has a lot more popularity, and thus there will probably be much higher demand for his shoe. Again, I didn't take into account the stock that much for a certain model, but I think if you look at the resale value for him specifically, definitely his personality off the court and what he does off the court plays a large role in that. So, yeah.